Hello, everyone. I am Ruchika Chitravanshi, and we are coming live from Business Standard Office in New Delhi to discuss the Economic Survey for FY 23-24, which was tabled in the Parliament by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. Let me welcome my guest, our Editorial Director, Mr. Ashok Kumar Bhattacharya, who is going to
Thank you.
take us through. Welcome, AKB. For those who don't know or are uninitiated, Economic Survey is a document which gives us a comprehensive understanding of the Indian economy and all that it went through in the last financial year. And it also makes suggestions and recommendations for the way forward. So it is a very important document for anyone who wants to understand what the Indian economy is all about. AKB, first of all, what is the big headline point in this economic survey?
Well, you are stealing the thunder right at the start. Let me say that the economic survey brings out a broad, conveys a broad message, which is that the Indian economy has been doing quite well. It has recovered from the adverse impact of the COVID pandemic. Its overall size of GDP is more, almost 20% more than what it used to be in the pre-pandemic days. So on all parameters, whether it is a question of exports, whether it is a question of growth, the Indian economy has recovered from that shock. Now, that's the broader message that the survey conveys. But I think if you read closer and read between the lines, what this economic survey does is it paints a picture of growth in the current year and probably in the coming few years, in the medium-term outlook, in a realistic context. When I meant a realistic context, it does not go gaga over that the Indian economy is poised to grow at 10% growth or 9% rate. It actually presents a number for the current financial year, which is between 6.5 and 7%. Remember that even the Reserve Bank of India, India's own central bank, had talked about the growth rate in the current year of 7.2%. And even the International Monetary Fund a few weeks ago talked about a growth rate of 7% for the Indian economy. So, for those of us who always believe that the economic survey will be, talking about India's growth rate in superlative terms, they must look at the survey and find out how the survey is actually quite realistic. And as a matter of fact, this growth rate, this assumption of 7% growth rate, 6.5 to 7%, is predicated on quite a few assumptions, which are very interesting, and we can discuss them.
Yes, absolutely, sir. We'll come back to that. In fact, CA in the press conference not so long ago has said that it's not that we are pessimistic, but we are keeping in mind all the challenges that are there, and we want to be pleasantly surprised instead of be disappointed when the growth numbers come. And in the past also, he has been a bit conservative, sir. The other thing that I asked CA as well, but did not get a very clear answer, and I'm sure you can throw more light, is the tax statement that the economic survey makes, that tax policies are critical to tackling inequality in India. So what does he mean by this?
Well, it's a very interesting point that you mention and you raise here. And to get into the nitty-gritty of it, let me quote this entire sentence that you are referring to. What he says is that tax policies on the treatment of capital and labor incomes will likely play a more important role in the coming years, especially since the deployment of technology like AI may have a more deleterious impact on employment and income. Now, I think he is making a very important, a fundamental point on taxation policy, that do you tax capital the same way as you need to tax income? And although it's a fallacy of many journalists, including myself, that you try to draw signals and lessons from what the economic survey says about the budget. But I think, I cannot resist that temptation of saying that probably he is hinting at a scenario in which, if not in tomorrow's budget, the government of India's next few budgets will probably look at this differential treatment of taxes on capital and income in a manner that the risks arising out of this equation that he talked about can be mitigated to some extent.
So please put a pin in that, because it may be a fallacy, but at the end, I would want to come back to the budget cues in this survey. But before that, you talked about the risk that he's talking of. Can you just elaborate a little bit on the risk that he's saying?
Well, there are about two or three major risks, and they touch upon all key areas. One is, of course, the geopolitical risks that he talks about. And the geopolitical risks he is saying that, the capital flows may be adversely impacted. The interest rates as a result may go up or may not go down as is expected. So there are geopolitical risks that may impact this kind of a growth scenario, even of 6.5 to 7%. That's point number one. Point number two, which is quite reassuring from India's chief economic advisor, that he is worried about fragmentation in global trade and the rise of protectionism that might impact trade flows. So therefore, and as you know, that trade accounts for a good chunk of economic growth in any part of the world. So if that happens, then probably India's growth will also be impacted. And number three is the overvalued financial markets. And as a matter of fact, he even touches upon the how over financialization of markets may have their own risks for sustained growth in the country. And finally, he talks about the risks arising out of hiring, that there may be a hiring slowdown. And if there's a hiring slowdown, then obviously demand is impacted, and therefore growth will also be impacted. So I think these are the four broad risks that he highlights, and all the four risks are very important for policymakers to take note of, so that if not in the budget, but during the year, these are addressed.
That's again him being very realistic. So you talked of protectionism being rife, that the CA has mentioned. In this context, he has talked about agriculture as being a very important driver of growth. How do you see this statement in the light of our agenda of becoming Viksit Bharat by 2047? We are saying agriculture is the important engine of growth.
Not too many economic surveys in the past have laid so much emphasis on agriculture as this economic survey. And he is talked about how India's economic growth potential can be adequately realized by not just focusing on industry or manufacturing or on services, but also on agriculture, which can also help us address some of our critical food security issues. So I think this is a very important area that is focused on, and Indian agriculture needs to be rescued from continued policy deficit, I would say. We haven't seen the kind of policy attention that it requires, except paying almost lip service by increasing MSPs and increasing your farm income transfers like the PM Kisan. We have actually not realized the true potential of agriculture. There were attempts at changing agricultural laws, but they were stalled because of the farmers' agitation. So, what he is talking right now is that you need to look at agriculture not only in terms of gaining productivity, making sure that there are incentives and disincentives built into farming by which instead of growing more paddy, we grow crops that give better returns to the farmers. So I think there are many other issues. But if you allow me to say, the medium-term outlook that he paints in this survey is quite interesting, and agriculture is certainly one of them. He also highlights the need for nurturing private investment. And I think that's a very, very important area. Of course, the survey talks about early signs of a revival of private investment in the sense that investment in machinery and equipment and intellectual properties, they have begun rising, and they are almost rising at the same pace as the government's public expenditure, capital expenditure. So I think that's a good sign. But the fact that among the six areas that the economic survey highlights, underlines, which to be need to be nurtured, not only agriculture but also private investment figure in that list.
So the survey has also taken a very realistic, at the same time, it has set very ambitious goals as far as job creation goes. CA has said that India needs to create 78.5 lakh jobs annually in the non-farm sector. Overall, on the jobs, what is the takeaway from the survey?
Yes, I think is a very important point. You talked about creating more jobs, but he's actually raised the debate to a different level, and a very important level, which is that address the education employment gap effectively. I think what he is hinting at is that we have we educate people, we train our people, but they are not necessarily employable. So what happens is that there are vacancies in industries where they can hire people, but the people that we educate are not trained or educated in a manner that they become worthy of employment. So I think this education employment gap is a serious issue, which means that there has to be greater attention on skilling and reskilling and making sure that Indian youth is trained adequately to be fit and proper for employment.
So we have time for one last question. Of course, we can go on and on. This is a very, very prolific eco survey that we have with us. But tomorrow is the budget day, and CA does seem to give some cues towards where this budget document should head. What are some of the key takeaways according to you?
Well, I know you are landing me into a tricky situation, but let me try. I have a feeling that his emphasis on over financialization of the markets is a hint at some sort of taxation which reduces the propensity among investors to go in for retail investments that are that may create risks in the market. I'm referring to the futures and options market. The derivatives market have been a cause of concern, the manner in which it's growing. So I don't know whether the chief economic advisor, by referring to over financialization, was hinting at some sort of a step there or not. There you refer to the tax policy on capital and income. That's maybe some sort of signal may come there. Agriculture is clearly something that the budget should look at by either making sure that the shift away from paddy and wheat, particularly, which are water guzzling crops, we move to more cash crops. There is a reference to financing of green transition as one of the key areas to sustain India's medium-term outlook. That is certainly, and most importantly, is the state capacity. I think he talks about building of state capacity and a kind of a tripartite pact between the government at the center, the government in the states, and the private sector. I do not know how the budget will address that issue, But this tripartite pact that he's talking about and relationship of trust between government at the center, government in the states, and the private sector, this is a very, very, very important institutional mechanism he's talking about to sustain growth in the coming years. Let's see what the budget has in store for us.
Thank you so much, AKB, for all those insights and putting all of these information in perspective. Thank you so much, viewers, for
Thank you.
joining us. And stay tuned tomorrow for a very special discussion with AKB and our editor in chief, Shailesh Dobal, on the